Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Wednesday, April 20th. Bitcoin pulling back a little bit as the Qs go negative, still above that 41K level. Saw a bit of resistance at 42K, but plenty to talk about in these markets today. I know CJ's got a new project that is growing in TVL that he would like to share with you guys. Excited about that, and we'll talk about a whole lot more. But before we get started, CJ, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing well, Monty, thanks. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on. It kind of reminds me of like the Solidly airdrop and when everybody migrated and bridged over to Phantom. And then you saw the ecosystem projects like Boo and like Spirit Swap and Paint Swap. All the ecosystem projects within Phantom absolutely started to go in bonkers. And we're seeing the same thing from the Optimism projects this morning because Coinbase has added just a page. Just one page.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes with Coinbase. One page. We've seen the effect of a Coinbase listing, and if they add a page, that really means something. So, what has people so excited?
Yeah. So, no data yet, of course, because the token has not launched yet. But Optimism, if you are unaware of it, it is a layer 2 scaling solution or sidechain for Ethereum. It's very similar to a lot of the other layer 1s in terms of how you would use it, like Matic, for instance. It's basically just a network that you add into MetaMask, and then you bridge funds from Ethereum then to the Optimism layer 2 solution. So it's pretty indistinguishable from the end user's perspective from any other like MetaMask EVM compatible layer 1. Nevertheless, it's very interesting because a lot of the projects have been really taking off after that news. As you can see, the one-day change in a lot of these, for instance, Zip is up nearly 40%. Synthetics, which is essentially the mere protocol of Ethereum, trading synthetic assets and tokenized stocks, things of that sort, up around 18%. Uniswap, not doing a whole lot. But yeah, ecosystem is popping off. And as you can see from the chart here by DeFi Llama, total value lock just continues to increase in the last 24 hours, going up roughly $60 million in the last 24 hours to reaching a peak of roughly 520 million. So really interesting price action and movement coming out of that token, but definitely keep an eye out for some of these L1 scaling solutions. Well, Optimism is L2, of course, but we talked about Neon, Solana's EVM layer, scheduled to launch in June yesterday, and then Optimism as well. So there's some new tokens come to the market. Make sure you're sharp and are aware of those release dates and some of the interesting price action that could occur following those dates.
Good stuff, CJ. Thank you for that. I mean, we've talked in the past, like you said, with the Solidly airdrop, how total value locked increasing can be a precursor for positive price action. So definitely a metric worth watching. Going to keep monitoring that on DeFi Llama. So thank you for putting that on our radar. But let's hop into Bitcoin now because we are getting some volatility in the last couple of hours here. This is the hourly chart for Bitcoin. As you can see, in the last hour, we had a pretty ugly hourly candle here where we got rejected at the 42K level, pulled back, and are since bouncing a bit. We saw some nice supply absorption at about 41.5 and are looking to turn back up. One thing that many of you in our chat have already noted is the fact that this pullback in BTC coincided with a pullback in the Qs here. As you can see here, the Qs flipped negative this morning, are pulling back on some relatively strong bearish volume. So that is definitely not helping. That being said, we do have the DXY turning down. Let's take a look at the daily chart actually for a more clear perspective. But we have the DXY turning down for the first time in a couple of weeks, significantly turning down with a bearish engulfing candle at the top of this uptrend. We've talked a lot about this in the last couple of weeks, CJ, and how this kind of flight to cash is indicative of people not willing to take risk, not willing to invest in speculative risk on assets like Bitcoin. So during this 2-week period, we saw a significant slide in Bitcoin, a lot of the altcoins, and also speculative tech assets on, in the traditional equity market. So now that this is pulling down, that's definitely worth noting. I think it marks perhaps the beginning of more speculative risk tolerance. In yesterday's episode, CJ, really did a more deep dive technically on how the DXY, even the TNX, which is continuing to climb a bit today, are both so overbought, especially relative to many of the risk on assets like Bitcoin, like ETH, and even some more tech facing assets in the traditional equity market. So now that we're seeing the DXY turn down, I think we may see some positive price action in a lot of these speculative assets that have been sliding since the DXY really started to rip to the upside and has retested 100. So for Bitcoin, we have a very clear next significant hurdle being the 20 period smooth moving average. And then beyond that, the next level to watch is the 200 period moving average. A lot of people have their eyes on this level. Obviously, we got promptly rejected there in the past. But as you can see, hitting a bit of resistance at 20 period smooth, getting above this is the next most significant hurdle. And as you can see, that getting above this level has often led to some continuations of positive price action and has acted as support in the past as well. So now that we're getting above this level, I want to see something similar to what we saw here, and kind of a similar setup to what I talked about for ETH yesterday, where we break above this level, come back down, confirm the 20 period smooth moving averages support. That to me validates the possibility of a move to retest 48K. Going to be watching out for the same thing here in the next couple of days, as we are right up against that 20 period smooth moving average at about 42.2, and getting above that I think will be very, very critical. So that's what I'm seeing for Bitcoin. Obviously still very much contingent on what we're seeing with treasury yields, what we're seeing with the DXY, and just the Qs in general. So we're keeping an eye on that. But I think overall things are still looking more favorable than they were just a few days ago, and that has me a bit optimistic. So that's all I got for Bitcoin. I will pass it back to you, CJ.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of traders who have been trading this range quite successfully, just kind of playing it level to level, where I think that's a pretty optimal strategy when you are in a range. And as we approach resistance here, namely with the 20 smooth moving average coming roughly at 42K, that was a pretty good level to short. If you still are taking that level to level approach, the problem with the level to level approach over time is that eventually you're going to break out into some type of trending environment. So is this the time, we break out above that 20 smooth moving average, create some continuous higher highs? I think the chances are better than what they've been throughout the past 2 months or 3 months. So we'll see what happens. But one thing I do want to bring up in terms of sentiment that we've discussed a lot over the past week, have just really talked about how sentiment has been at really a 30-year low in terms of just overall markets in general. This is a reflection of the Bitcoin CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange options, and the overall position distribution within the options. So when we're looking at open interest, there are, let's just start by looking at some of the extremes, namely the calls. So you have traders in the market who are betting on kind of the gamma squeeze or the breakout to 50K. And then, of course, 45K as well. So you could assume a lot of those have like the 45 to 50 spread on roughly right now. And then, obviously the most bearish perspective comes in roughly at 35K. And so, yeah, a lot of bearish sentiment overall from that. I apologize, just had some window washers startled me a little bit, but I'll pass it back to you, Monty.
I do not envy those window washers, CJ. Up on the 43rd floor today, it's not that warm, pretty windy. That is a tough job. So, yeah, let's address this question here. Not even a question; it's a comment from Bob, and I agree that it's definitely important here. The VIX down to 20 again too. Looking at that chart, CJ, we haven't really seen these levels in quite some time. We were obviously, very, very volatile just 2 weeks ago, up in the, mid 30 range. Now all the way back down, coming down to retest the lows. What exactly do you make of this here as we, kind of come down, retest 20, which is pretty close to the local low we set at the beginning of the month here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough point in time because we are really at a turning point in markets. But as just looking at that chart from a very technical perspective, seems like there's a lot of support down there back in the 20s. Doesn't mean we have to accelerate to the upside right away. We could definitely consolidate at those levels a lot. But typically, if you just look at that chart, we don't usually go below those levels. Another thing that's quite interesting to look at is BND, or the overall Vanguard Total Bond Market ETF, actually up today about 0.5% after just a continuous downturn. So that'll definitely be interesting to see how that plays out in the markets as well. Oil coming down once again. I'm interested in silver and gold as well, and what those commodities have done, if they've continued their downtrend since yesterday, because that kind of tells you whether or not we move back to risk on and risk off. So silver's still holding up decent today, not down a whole lot, kind of bouncing from one of its moving averages. So definitely something to consider there. But overall, it'll be interesting, and I'll leave it with you for any final words.
One thing that I would add is that, on that gold silver relationship, look at gold right now, retesting the 20-period smooth moving averages support, whereas we have Bitcoin retesting it as resistance here. So I think that kind of speaks to the dynamic in the market right now. And I think that you could kind of potentially use this as an opportunity. If we see gold break this 20-period smooth moving average, I think you're right, CJ. I think that is an typically indicative of more speculative risk tolerance, and I think that could definitely benefit Bitcoin. And when you have this confluence of indicators where we have a clear breakup level for Bitcoin and a breakdown level for gold, I think that's worth noting due to the inverse relationship of these two assets. So definitely something to keep on your radar here as we enter the middle of the week. But I think that's all we got for today. Also, don't forget, we have our member webinar today at 11:30 Central. So join us there. CJ, I see you have one more point, so I will pass back to you to wrap things up.
Yeah, just going along with those inverse relationships, you had mentioned gold. I mean, it's interesting. Oil, very similar state.
Yeah.
Has been making lower highs and kind of falling into somewhat of a descending triangle. A little bit overbought on the Stoke, but it's interesting how you see those inverse relationships with like risk on assets approaching resistance, risk off assets starting to form support after coming down for a little bit. But yeah, that's all. Appreciate you guys watching. Like Monty said, we'll be doing our weekly member webinar where we take an hour to answer you guys' questions. And if you'd like to try access to that, please just check out the link in the description below, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content you saw here today. But we appreciate it, guys. Hope you have a great day in the world wherever you're at.